Good day, my name is Sky, and thank you so much for spending some of your study time with me and Smart Poker Study. So I'm excited about today's episode because I get to speak about something near and dear to my heart. No, I'm not going to talk about my kids or my wife, but I am going to help you navigate your poker studies and purposeful play with one of my favorite learning principles, one until done with action. To help you get the most out of this podcast episode, please go to the show notes page, smartpokerstudy.com/pod395. You can listen and follow along with the show notes right there. Basically like a transcript of the episode. Once again, smartpokerstudy.com/pod395. Okay, let's roll. Gambate!
You will see everything. Are you ready, my son?
Yes, I am. I think.
Then we haven't a moment to lose.
So I believe that the best approach to poker improvement is something that I call one until done with action. The idea here is that you work on just one strategy, or you plug one poker leak at a time. You're studying only that one thing while you purposefully take action with the strategies that you're learning. It's like if you're, for example, studying c-bet bluffing. You take notes on a video, or maybe an article, a podcast, a book chapter, or a chapter from a book that you read, then all your play is centered around making great c-bet bluffs. And when you're not involved in the hand, you imagine you're the c-better, and you consider how successful a c-bet bluff would be right now, given the board and the other player. When you're studying your hands after you play, like a little review session, you're taking the time, you're looking at all the spots where you made the c-bet bluff, or where you failed to make the c-bet bluff for whatever reason, right? All of your play, all of your study is centered on c-bet bluffing. So I talked about this overall idea of hitting one thing at a time in my books Pre-Flop Online Poker and Post-Flop Online Poker. In the first one, Pre-Flop Online Poker, here's what I said, and it was about the dominoes of poker. Knocking over one domino at a time will avoid poker study overload and will lead to significant improvement in your poker game. The domino effect states that a domino can knock over another domino that's 50% bigger than itself. This has been demonstrated with full-scale mock-up dominoes by some ambitious researchers in the past. Now, in this book, I gave a list of dominoes to topple on your way to poker excellence. This list is just what I feel is most important in a logical order for the average player. However, you right now, you're listening to this, you have specific things that you want to work on or things that you need to work on. Whether they're new skills that you want to put to use, maybe plugging some known poker leaks, maybe working on your mental game, whatever it is. You have your own things. You don't necessarily want to follow my list of dominoes. You can. Feel free to follow it. Please do. The books were built around that list of dominoes. But you are your own player with your own special needs right now. So what I want you to do, and this is your very first action step for this episode, I want you to pause the podcast and list out all of the things that you want to learn and all of the leaks that you want to plug. Do it right now. Now, your list might only be 2 items long, or it might be 10 items long. What you need to do is figure out what is the most important thing that you should tackle right now. Now, I've given direction on how to proceed, what the most important things are, like my list of dominoes, what you should focus on before the next thing and before the next thing, right? Well, like I said, take a look at your list. You want to find the most important thing. Now, whatever it is to you, I don't care if it's a post-flop thing or pre-flop. Maybe it's a mental game issue versus a technical poker skill. It really doesn't matter. Just look at your list and answer this question right now. What's the one thing that I can learn right now that would propel me furthest in my journey? And that's it. What's that one thing right now? I want you to look at your list of items that you already wrote down and decide on it. circle that item on your list. All of your poker study, all of your poker play is going to be focused on this one thing for the next week. So to follow the one until done with action plan, here it is. You focus on only one strategy or league. Let's dive into these individually right now. You focus starting with why you want to focus on only one strategy or league at a time, piece of content at a time, on one action step at a time, and on one study and play session at a time. Let's dive into these individually right now, starting with why you want to focus on only one strategy or league at a time. Centering all of your study and play around one thing at a time, that's what's going to propel you the furthest and the fastest. It's going to make your studies the most efficient it can be. When you try to spread your focus over multiple items, you're doing yourself a really big disservice, and you will not effectively learn any of it. So don't spread yourself and your poker attention thin by focusing on more than one thing at a time. Also, like I said before, there might be a perfect order for the things that you need to study. But of course, you might not know the best order, or you don't have a coach like me to tell you exactly what to focus on. It doesn't matter. Simply choose one thing from your list at a time and work down your list. If you have 10 items, you're going to get to all 10 eventually. The next aspect to one until done with action was to take it 1 week at a time. Now, this is a really big one. This is important. You need time to learn and practice new strategies. You also need time to unlearn bad habits. Maybe over months or years of play, you've learned to defend your big blind with any pair, anything suited, anything connected, and any ace. It doesn't matter who your opponent is, what their bet size is, what their stack size is, what a part of the tournament that you're in if you're playing tournaments, what the table dynamics are right now. Doesn't matter at all. You've got the bad habit of any pair, anything suited, anything connected, any ace, defending that big blind. Do you think that you can break this bad habit with one study session and one play session? Do you think you can break it with watching one video before moving on to the next video? Now, this bad habit of yours, it was months or maybe even years in the making. So you have to realize it's going to take time to break it. It might even require that you revisit any new strategies for another week, like 3 or 4 weeks down the line, right? So be prepared to revisit your prior studies and spend another week focusing on them, especially if they revolve around like significant leaks you're trying to plug or bad habits you're trying to break. Maybe this week you can stop yourself from defending the big blind way too often. But next week, when your studies go to something else and you kind of like lose focus on making better big blind calls, super easy to go to bad or to go back to return to bad habits. So when that happens, plan on spending another week revisiting everything. The next part of this is one piece of content at a time. So any poker training video, podcast episode, a book chapter, or maybe an online article should teach you some strategies that you can use right now. I can tell you any single chapter out of one of my books will teach you probably like a dozen or more plays or things to look out for, or players to target. Like there's specifically so many things for you to utilize, so many strategies for you to use from my books. I recommend learning from one piece of content every 3 days at most, oftentimes just one piece per week. And like I discussed in last week's episode, your goal is to learn from the content that you consume, not to merely expose yourself to as much content as possible. So what I want you to do, one piece of content at a time, take notes on what you learn from that item. Then you must practice what you learned. Keep practicing and revisit that piece of content and your notes over and over until you feel comfortable and you find success using the strategies. Do this before moving on to your next piece of content or your next strategy to focus on. Next up is one action step at a time. So, a single piece of content, one podcast episode, one video, they might give you ideas for 5 things that you can practice when you're playing. it's probably going to be difficult to keep all 5 things in mind as you play, because these are new ideas after all. So you might need to focus on just one aspect at a time. Let's give a nice example of this. You might learn these 5 things from me regarding 3-bet bluffing. Thing 1, be more willing to 3-bet bluff versus loose and aggressive players when you have position. Thing 2, make more 3-bet bluffs versus smaller open raises, maybe between 2.2 and 2.5 big blinds. Thing 3, use suited and connected aces like ace-5 suited and ace-10 suited. Thing 4, have a plan in case they 4-bet you. And thing 5, have a post-flop plan in case they call. So ask yourself, how can I steal the pot on the flop or turn if I don't hit anything? If I do hit, how can I go for value? If you're uncomfortable with 3-bet bluffing right now, how in the world are you going to keep in mind all of these 5 items as you play? You might want to break up your action taking with these 5 things over the next few sessions, maybe just focusing on 1 or 2 each session. Eventually, you're going to be able to, with enough practice and focus on it, you're going to be able to wrap your mind around all of these items and even more, and you'll be able to consider all of them as you play and help you make the best decisions in regards to 3-bet bluffing in this exact example. But just know that it's going to take some time, so allow yourself that time with using all the strategies that you've learned over multiple play sessions. And lastly, speaking of study sessions and play sessions, you need to focus on one study and one play session at a time. Now, I recommend for every play session, you have one study session where you review the relevant hands from your play session. So if you're focused on 3-bet bluffing right now, you want to use the strategies when you play tonight. Of course, I recommend to have your notes open as you play to remind yourself of the strategies that you're trying to learn. Tomorrow morning, review your session and all those 3-bet bluffs that you made, and all the times you chose to not 3-bet bluff. Once again, whether you're studying or playing, have your notes open as you study and add or edit your notes as you gain experience playing and studying with purpose, because not just is consuming a piece of content going to teach you strategies, playing with those will help to reinforce and really ingrain those strategies into your game. And as you're playing, you might learn some things that you didn't learn necessarily from that piece of content. Maybe 1 or 2 subtle little things or things that are typical or important about your own specific games and opponent. Whatever new things that you learned as you're gaining experience making the plays, add those to your notes. And you want to keep repeating this cycle of play and then study. Play some more, study some more. Do that over and over until you're comfortable and you're successful with the strategies and you're ready to move on to the next item on your list. Speaking of next, what is next? So let's imagine you finish this week out studying something and you feel confident about the strategies and you're successful. Well, I want you to look at your list again, right? You wrote a list of 3, 5, 10 items. Cross off the item that you were focused on this past week. Now, ask and answer the question again. What's the one thing that I can learn right now that would propel me furthest on my journey? Choose that next thing and follow the same process again of 1 until done with action.
Great. I think I got it, but just in case, tell me the whole thing again. I wasn't listening.
Alrighty, your learning isn't complete until you go to the show notes page, smartpokerstudy.com/pod395. Follow along there with the full-on transcript. Got 1 or 2 videos on that page for you to learn from as well. And speaking of learning, you can really accelerate your learning by going to thepokerforge.com and becoming a member today. This is my one-of-a-kind poker training site where I combine strategy, action steps, quizzes, and play demonstrations and hand history reviews like no other site does. Until next time, take action both on and off the felt to become the player that you want to be.